enough money in our country.
You said just now that the Ethiopians dislike the Americans as a result of the Italians.
Yes, this is really shocking for me. Why?
Just wait. It's really wonderful. Don't you know the relation between Ethiopia and Italy?
Yes.
From 1936 to 1941? Would you mind telling me if you have come across it in your history? I don't think so you would. But let me hear it.
Oh, I like better if you speak. What do you learn in your school?
Do you mean
we don't learn very much about the very, very recent history in our school.
You don't even know the countries you have tried to colonize?
Yes, I know this. And I think that they built many roads too in your, and I think that they did good things too.
Yeah, that's true. But don't you know what you did? I mean, didn't you learn in your history that what Italy did to Ethiopia? In what year? And when did they go out or things like that? Don't you come across?
Go on, tell us.
That's a fair question, Marcy. Tell us what you learned, or what you know about the Italian trouble with Ethiopia.
Oh, I don't know very much indeed. I think that perhaps I studied something about it, but now I forgot it.
Well, I'll be pleased to tell you if you haven't come across it in your history. Well, it should have been, because you have been in my country for 5 years.
Yeah.
From 1936 to 1941.
Yes,
you came and bombarded our country, killed all of people, and did all sorts of things. And still you don't know the history of this thing. Well, luckily you were kicked out in 1941.
Well, Yoma,
yeah.
Maybe she doesn't know it because it's much more important to the Ethiopians than to the Italians.
Well, of course I admit, it might be as well important to know for her, I mean, what her country has done, what countries Italy dominated, what countries Italy tried to colonize. Don't you think that would at least be important to know what countries she colonized?
It would be a little important to them and very important to you.
It's very important to me and I know it well. And I have explained it to you.
I wonder if this raises a question that we ought to tackle. Is it a good thing that in schools today in 1958, you don't learn much about 1938? Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? And is it true of other events of the 1930s?
Well, I think it's a bad thing. I would like to know much more of our government, of our economy, and of all the things that are happening now in the world. In our school, we don't study this kind of thing. We just study history as far as I think the First World War.
Well, don't you ever get to study, for example, Italy under fascism and the Second World War?
Yes, I think that perhaps I'm studying the things next year, I think, but I'm not sure.
But now, at 18, your history that you've studied in school has just brought you up to 1914.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't study current history, what kind of things do you study in school, Marcy? Now, I don't mean to be unkind, but you said that the Americans had a childish education and were completely uncultured. What do you learn in school?
Oh, we learn a lot of things which I don't know if they are very useful for us. Because, for instance, we in my school, I'm attending a classical school, and so we learn Greek and Latin, history and philosophy, and a lot of very old-fashioned things.
But you haven't really learned yet about the fascist period in Italy.
No, I think I'm learning something next year.
Well, now, what about in Ethiopia, Yilma? What have you learned in school about this period? Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we celebrate the day the Italians were kicked out every year. And I don't mean it's our independent day. We had our independence even before Christ, rather. And we just remember that date and just celebrate it. And of course, every individual in Ethiopia wouldn't ever forget what the Italians had done to us.
What the Italians do to us?
They killed many people, innumerable.
Why?
Well, he never...
They'd like to colonize our country, and we wouldn't let them do so, well, we have to sacrifice so many bloods and things like that in order to keep the freedom of our country. Don't you think that's good?
Oh, yes, of course.
Perfectly true.
I guess.
Well, Rina, tell me about the education in your country. Do you learn really history up to date?
Well, I wouldn't say as up-to-date as in American schools, for in American schools, they seem to know everything more about the present history than about the past. And yet I think perhaps in this atom age of ours, it's more important. But I'd like to tell Yilma just something. Yilma, do you know that you were talking about your very old country, but I don't know if you ever heard about the Zimbabwe ruins well, it's more or less in Rhodesia, a little bit north of South Africa, the Union. And we think that the Ethiopian people built it there, and there can be found no traces whatsoever which people inhabited it or whatever happened.
It's probably the Ethiopians, I agree.
I'm sure.
And that's the proof that our country, Ethiopia, existed before Christ also.
Very
You say that your people came down from the Middle East. You are not native African.
No, not at all.
Ethiopians.
As a matter of fact, we don't have the Negro blood at all. And we migrated from the Semitic type of the Saudi Arabia and Yemen and the countries just away from the Red Sea. And the origin could be said that some people drafted and came to the northern part of Ethiopia. And then they migrated inwards. And time went on, they stayed and stayed. And then the Hamitic races from the bordering, from the south and from Sudan and things like that, from the countries
But
in
if
Africa.
you, excuse me for interrupting, but if you don't have Negro blood, then this is news to me. The Ethiopians, I would think, wouldn't have any particular feeling about race relations in other parts of Africa.
We don't at all feel any relationship with it. It's none of our concern. I mean, we just don't care about it. As we don't have the Negro blood, we shouldn't have to worry ourselves. I mean, the color you might, the color of my face is just dark because it's due to the exposure of the sun. And my country is a mountainous country. It's 800 feet above sea level. And it's more or less nearer to the sun than is the other countries that lay near the equator.
Yuma?
Yeah.
You're not white?
And not black?
Not black. What
Yeah.
are you?
It's just in between.
Yilma, and I would like to know, are you, for instance, very much interested in the South African race policy? Or do you stand more or less objective towards that?
Not at all. We wish you would do things fairly. I mean, you don't treat the native South Africans as you do right now. But as a matter of fact, we don't care. We just listen to your policies and things that go on in South Africa. But I'd like to ask you one question. Would it become more, would it be, would you think it would be a little...
You mean, wait, just before...
Would the matter be worse or better, within these few years? Or what is the stand right now of this South African problem?
Could I just ask you another question before I answer yours?
Yeah.
Is there any discrimination, for instance, between the separate tribes in your country? How do you, for instance...
I'm very happy you brought that point. As a matter of fact, the Amhara tribes consider ourselves superior to the other tribes, to the adjacent tribes that live in the same community. And we just consider them inferior and consider ourselves superior. And that could be something of segregation, but it's not actually in the sense that you take it and the Americans in Little Rock take it. It's just very unprominent.
Do you mean that you think that the other tribes are perhaps a little too primitive, for instance?
Not a matter of primitiveness or so. It's just a matter of ignorance, I shall say.
Oh.
The Amhara tribes are more cute and clever. And that's why, they are just...
That's your tribe?
Yeah, that's my tribe. I'm
But
proud of
very
it.
modest, yes.
Yeah.
And Yuma, do you have whites in Ethiopia? White people?
Foreigners?
White people, yes.
Yeah, lots of them. We have the Americans, as a matter of fact. They're working in different departments. And I'd like to say one point on that. They seem to be more cooperative in... they looked as though they are cooperative in my country. And I thought it was because they were in a foreign country that they should cooperate. But no, it's... I proved it right here. They come in, they have assemblies in communities and things like that. I mean, they are more cooperative than I actually saw it in my country.
Yoma, just to get back to another point, do you then think, for instance, it's fair that if there is discrimination in Ethiopia, even between, well, the same race and the same nation...
Not the same race, of course the same nation.
The same nation. But do you think then it's fair to judge South Africans as white towards black? If you don't, for instance, acknowledge the less good Ethiopians, well,
we do acknowledge them. I don't mean we don't actually consider our discrimination, what you call it, is not as prominent and worldwide known as it's in South Africa. That's it.
Well, what are we